inspiring views from all over our great nation. We're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236 and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB plus radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And it's a big day today because is the true extent of the terrorist threat being hidden from us? 6,000 people a year, apparently, are referred to the anti-extremism programme PREVENT. But a report into that PREVENT programme has been delayed because, maybe, there are fears that some Islamic groups may be offended and take legal action. Lots to discuss there. It comes amid other reports that the police has not solved more than 1 million burglaries. So, we already have concerns over terror and law and order to contend with on this show. But what about our border force? More officers on strike. Aside from travel plans, what does this mean for national security? Talking of national security, have MPs been compromised by drinking too much and getting up to no good on foreign trips? Are they at risk of blackmail and the money in your pocket, or lack of it, frankly? Some families could be paying 96% tax. 96%. 6%. Staggering. All that to come and much, much more right here. gbviews@gbnews.uk is that email address. I want to hear from you on a couple of topics today. Should the Prevent report be published in full? Are we too afraid of offending some members of the Muslim community? And should we have more police officers in the force? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your latest headlines.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 3. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were there at the time. His family say their hearts were broken following his death. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old man was arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres in the east of England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Downing Street is urging unions and employers to reach an agreement. The Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, told GB News public support is waning.
Oh, we got this odd little message coming from the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of health in recent hours, but his condition is under control and he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
Religious journalist Luke Seneville says the Vatican is now in uncharted territory.
If the Pope Benedict dies, it will be the very first time that a Pope dies, an emerite Pope, Pope Emerite dies in the Vatican. So it will be all new. We don't know exactly, even if the Vatican has prepared things, we don't know exactly what will be organised and how it will.
The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 individuals with direct links to the UK due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. A Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims the UK is inciting riots within the country and called on Iran to stop holding foreign nationals for diplomatic leverage. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor could take place in May 2024 after a consultation process. In the US, the number of people who've died in the city of Buffalo has risen to 32 as the country continues to battle a deadly winter storm. Authorities in the New York state have been digging out vehicles from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall there. At least 60 people have died nationwide as the monster storm has battered North America over the last week. Meanwhile, here in the UK, provisional figures from the Met Office show this year has been the warmest on record. By the end of the year, 2022 will have seen the highest annual average temperature. It beats a record set in 2014 of just under 10 degrees Celsius. The Met Office says every month, apart from December, has been warmer than average. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
OK, people, here we go. So it's been reported that a long-awaited overhaul of the government's counter-extremism programme has been delayed because of a cabinet row between Suella Braverman and Michael Gove. Here's why. According to The Times, the Home Secretary, that's Braverman, is ready to publish the independent review of the Prevent programme and accept all of its recommendations. It is expected to criticise a number of organisations and highlight some Prevent-funded groups that have been, in their views anyway, promoting extremist narratives. Well, the Levelling Up Secretary, that's Michael Gove, is supposedly not buying into it and basically wants it to be presented in full, but including naming those groups. The Home Office supposedly fearful that that could lead to lawsuits. But the wider public, I think, will be concerned because until this report is published, then what it suggests can't really be put into place, and therefore are we at more risk of terror attacks? And are we too afraid, dare I say it, of offending some Islamic groups in this country in order to publish it? I imagine that will go down quite badly with you people at home or listening in your cars or whatever you're doing. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's get stuck into the finer points of this now. It is a bit complex. We'll pick through it. Joining me now in the studio is international security and border control expert. It's Henry Bolton. Henry, why is there a row over this? I've had a good read over it. As far as I can tell, there is genuine fear of upsetting some Islamic groups, and that is stopping this report being published in full.
I think that's it in a nutshell, Patrick. Look, you did say at the beginning that, and this is what the papers are reporting, it's not a row in the Cabinet between Michael Gove and Suella Braverman. It's not. What's happened is that the report is ready for publication. The Home Office has recommended to the Home Secretary that it should not be published with, as you said earlier, the names of some individuals and organisations, including organisations that have received Prevent programme funding, with those in there, because the Home Office civil servants are concerned this might expose the Home Office to legal action, particularly because one of the things being mentioned in the report is that some of those organisations who have received that funding from the government for Prevent have actually been promoting extremism.
And this is a key point. Is this what I want to drill down with you on now? So that Prevent programme, apparently anyway, has a £40 million budget. We all know that Prevent is designed to help stop terrorism. The Prevent programme has come under criticism, though, because there have been, well, frankly, numerous terror attacks, and we all know things like that happened on Westminster Bridge, the particular chap who was actually, as part of a de-radicalisation scheme as well, the one who was taken down with a narwhal tusk as well on Southwark Bridge, and the Manchester Arena bombing, for example. All of these different attacks. There have also been a couple of far-right extremism attacks, but the concern, as far as I understand it, Henry, is that there are some groups, potentially Islamic groups, who have been accused in this report anyway of actively promoting extremism, and they don't want to name them just in case it makes them a bit angry.
Well, in case that they then take a libel action against the Home Office. Well, to be honest, if the government has done its due diligence, and part of its due diligence is to provide this review that's been done, then indeed it needs to actually grasp the nettle and say, look, this is what the report has found. We're going to publish it and let these people take us on for libel. Let them prove that they're not doing what we think they are in court. I think call their bluff. But the point is that this is what Michael Gove is saying. Michael Gove is... I'm no fan of Michael Gove, by the way. I am quite a fan of Suella Braverman. But Suella Braverman just wants to get the report out there. But Michael Gove has seen a draft of this and said, look, I think we should not be redacting these names. I think they should be out there. It's part of the report. It's part of the transparency of the report. It's part of what's going to keep us safe. And I think it needs to be out there. And if these people don't like it, we should not be afraid of it. And that really is the nux of it. And that is that the Home Office civil servants are afraid of upsetting people that this report is effectively saying constitute a threat to the UK national security. And that is a very worrying place for civil servants.
Whilst it's important that various different groups do engage with the Prevent programme and the Prevent scheme in order to help us combat terrorism, and we would not want to lose those groups and their cooperation, at the same time, it is a vital part of press freedom, and I would argue as well, public knowledge and security, to know who the groups are that are at least accused anyway, of actively using Prevent money and still promoting extremism, because that does pose a risk to the British public.
You know, if you hide this, even if it's still available, information that's available to certain people, if you hide it, then you're reducing the effectiveness of it. Now, I'm going to say something a little bit contentious. I'm a former police officer, and back 25 years ago, chief constables were quite open about saying, you know what, in this area, certain communities have a propensity towards different types of crime. It might be the sort of the white Caucasian community, the if you like, the English community that do this, or it might be another community that does that, or something.
Yeah.
But then we started to see chief constables being sacked for saying that. Yet it was absolutely the truth, and there are various dynamics behind why that happens. It's a fact of policing and criminality. And if you pretend it doesn't exist, then you fail to address it. And that's what I fear about this, and I fear the culture in the Home Office that's saying, let's hide this, let's paper over this, because it might be more grief than it's worth.
The British public, I think, possibly now more so than ever, with what's been going on in the Channel, what's been going on at migrant hotels, the terror threat in general, feel as though they are all too often being lied to, or at the very least being asked to accept something that they can see going on with their own eyes, and they're being asked to accept something completely different. I'm just going to read you a quote now from a source close to the author of this report into the counter-terror prevent scheme, which, as yet, that report is not being published. He said, or a source close to him said, there is widespread unhappiness to the approach of the Home Office, saying we can't say this or that about organisations, redacting and removing certain bits. Apparently there is frustration, and he's not buying the excuses. This smacks of a cover-up.
It smacks of cowardice, Patrick. If you are more afraid of upsetting people's feelings and having an argument than of doing the right thing when it comes to national security, you shouldn't be in the job that you're in. And Michael Gove is, I think, absolutely right on this. He is not accepting the excuses from the Home Office civil servants. He is not prepared to let this lie, I hope. At the moment, it looks as though he's not. And Suella Braverman hasn't commented, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But this is the civil servants saying we should redact it, Michael Gove saying no. It doesn't involve Suella Braverman as such yet, but she's going to have to step into it.
Something like 6,000 people a year are reportedly referred to the Prevent programme, which is a staggeringly high number.
It's a huge number. One of the problems of that is that it's like many things, a lot of complaints and referrals to these sort of things are sort of malicious. You've got to go through all of those.
There was also a case of a boy in a school one time who said that he supported UKIP, who was referred to the Prevent programme. So you would have to take that 6,000 number with a slight pinch of salt.
But it is a large number.
Yeah.
But if it's like many things, if the government's going to do something, it needs to properly resource it. And it's often failed in doing that. You mentioned borders earlier. There's a classic example.
Yeah.
The other thing that needs to be said about the Prevent programme, you said at the beginning that it's been criticised widely from the beginning. One of the reasons is because there has already not been proper engagement from the Muslim community. And that's been a fundamental weakness. And I'm sorry, but the primary risk to this country comes from Islamic extremism in terms of terrorism. It doesn't come from the right, it doesn't come from the left. We've had cases of left-wing terrorism, and Europe was, in the 70s, it was the predominant form of terrorism in Europe in the 70s, the Baader-Meinhof gang and so on. And we do have some right-wing terrorism, that's true, but the predominant threat is the ideological threat from religious extremists. And that's what this report is about, this is what Prevent is about, and we need to be full and frank about recognising what the weaknesses are.
And I think members of the public out there who are right to be concerned, and they are right to be concerned about the increase of far-right extremism. And this is not some kind of caveat that gets me out of trouble for saying what I want to say about the level of Islamist extremism. That is just a fact, OK? Far-right extremists made up a quarter of all referrals to the Prevent programme and overtook Islamist referrals for the first time in the year of March 2021. So that is a fact, OK? However, at the same time, Islamist extremism is by far and away the main focus of the Prevent scheme. It's the main focus. It makes up the majority of terrorists who are in prisons in the UK at the moment, and some would regard it as the more active pressing threat in terms of imminent terror attacks as well. And if certain groups with connections, alleged connections, to Islamist extremism are being protected from being named in a report, I think that the British public would possibly have a right to be very angry about that and wonder why they are being protected.
I think
very
it's not
quickly,
so much
Henry.
protection, Patrick, and this is my concern. It is lack of boldness. It's cowardice. They don't want to upset these people. It's not that they're protecting them, they just don't want to upset them.
And that's
a serious problem, and it says a lot for the social situation in the UK at the moment.
And indeed it does. Henry Bolton, thank you very, very much, international security and border control expert. Right, well, moving on from counter-terrorism, really, to law and order, because UK police have been criticised for leaving more than 1 million cases of theft and burglary in England and Wales last year unanswered, unaccounted for. The proportion of crimes that concluded with a charge is also down to just 5.4%, which is, I think most people would agree, quite a shockingly low number. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has branded the figures disgraceful. There is more to this than meets the eye, as ever. And joining me to discuss this right now is Donna Jones, Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner. Donna, thank you very much. Let's just tackle this head-on initially. The British public will see these numbers out. 1 million burglaries left unsolved, 1 million crimes like that left unsolved. And they will think, well, actually, I'm not being protected by my police force. What's going on?
Well, two things, Patrick. First of all, there has been a slight increase particularly in robberies. So teenagers, often teenage boys being robbed by other teenage boys. In fact, actually, burglary rates have come down. But I do share the concern that there is not a high enough solving and charge rate across England and Wales, as per the statistics that we've seen today in the national media. Now, this is in part because 3 or 4 years ago, there was a new policing protocol that was brought in, and it's called crime data integrity. And that's where, when you report a crime, you're asked at the time of being interviewed by a police officer, have you ever been a victim of any similar type of crime in the past? And if you say yes, they have to log every single incident. Now, I could be a victim of robbery or theft or burglary today. I may not want you to investigate anything that happened to me 3, 4, 5 years ago, but I'm telling you because you've asked me. So that's what's made the crime rates, the crime stats increase, look like there's been a massive spike in crime, when in fact there hasn't been. But there certainly is a concern for me as a police and crime commissioner with us not solving enough crimes. That is definitely the case.
Well, reading between the lines here, now, obviously, several thousand, I think it was 20,000 is the figure, police officers were, one way or another, axed under Theresa May. And then I'm looking at some other stats here, which shows that one of the main reasons why they couldn't find, well, they had to drop cases into the 1,145,254 theft and burglaries is because they couldn't find a suspect, supposedly. And then I'm reading here as well about 300,000 violent crimes. They were dropped. 2 million inquiries were dropped with no suspects identified. And I'm wondering whether or not this is police not being able to do their basic job, which is, frankly, hunt down a suspect.
Well, I think it's twofold. First of all, it's that additional historical reporting, which is skewing the figures, which is not helpful. But secondly, yes, we don't have enough cops in Britain right now. And that's why the Conservative government's pledge that 20,000 additional police officers, which, as you say, is in a large way, is recouping some of those police officers that were cut throughout austerity when Britain was trying to live within its means financially. So that is going towards recouping some of those police officers that were previously cut. Now, as you've said, the Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has come out today to say that the Labour Party, if they form the next government, will increase the number of police officers by 13,000 additional cops. Now, they know that the Conservative government are going to say exactly the same thing in the lead up to the next general election. They're trying to pip the Conservative government to the post here. What I am concerned about with Yvette Cooper's pledge today is we know that a new police officer costs around £50,000 a year. It's around £24,000–25,000 for their salary, 31% on cost with their pension, employers' NI, their training costs, their kit, everything else. So as police and crime commissioners, we allow around £50,000 a year. Now, 13,000 cops that Miss Cooper has announced today as the Labour pledge will cost £650 million. Now, the way that she's saying that she will pay for this is through improving procurement amongst police forces. Well, that would average out, there's 43 police forces in England and Wales, that averages out at just over £15 million per police force. Now, I can tell you, if there was 15 million quid to be saved in procurement with other police forces, I'd be doing it. I worked in banking. That's my profession before I got involved in politics, before I became a police and crime commissioner. There is not 650 million quid's worth of savings to be made across the country from procurement only. We already have a company called Blue Light Commercial. The Home Office set it up a couple of years ago. I was a director of that. I sat on the board of that until July this year. We are already procuring and buying things together, such as tasers, kits, uniforms, police cars. We're already doing this stuff. So what we've sadly got here again is uncosted, undeliverable, and I just think not very well thought out policy by Labour yet again. A bit like Diane Abbott all over again, really.
Well, I was about to say, yeah, you can imagine Diane Abbott doing the numbers on that. But that said, the British public, I think, could argue that there is the money out there. Potentially the money is being spent in different places. There is perhaps a certain irony, I won't get you to comment on this, but perhaps a certain irony that the security of the people in Kiev seems to be looked after with a blank cheque, but the security of someone in Shropshire or Derbyshire or Luton doesn't appear to be maybe treated with the same vigour. But do you think that we should, in all areas of society now, be spending more money recruiting our police force? Because I think we need a massive recruiting thing, especially given the fact that a Labour London mayor actually seems to be doing the anti-PR for the police, calling them all racist and misogynist, etc.
Yeah, I do. I do think we should be paying them a little bit more as their starting salary. I think that we need to look at the way that police pensions are calculated at the moment. Police officers cannot realise their pension at 30 years and then carry on working in policing. So they often go off and work in security, or they go off and work in in the MOD police. We are losing hundreds of years of experience every single month, with cops retiring at 50, 51, 52 years of age. They've got a good 10, 15 years worth of work in them before they would properly want to retire. So we do need to look at that. I've spoken to the Home Secretary about that direct already. But yes, I do think that we do need more police. I do very much welcome any political party's pledge to increase the number of police officers on the streets of Britain, and I'm very much looking forward to the Conservative Party, I hope, unveiling that similar pledge.
Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to, because at the minute there is a slight open goal for Labour, not least because the Tories have been in power so long, so that anything bad can actually be pinned on them, but also Labour looking like Yvette Cooper to steal a bit of a march and talk about refunding the police, which is nice because we've had a conversation about defunding them for far too long. But Donna, thank you very much. Donna Jones, our Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner. Now, a couple of big ones there for you to get your teeth stuck into at the top of the show, ladies and gentlemen. GBViews at gbnews.uk. In a nutshell, really, both of them involving public safety on the streets. One, when it comes to terrorism, are we too afraid of reporting a report into the Prevent scheme for fear of offending certain elements of the Muslim community? I imagine that'll go down badly. But also, why, oh, why are police in this country failing to solve things like 1 million thefts, not even able to find a suspect? GBViews at gbnews.uk. When I come back, it's another day of strikes across the UK. Border Force staff, rail workers, even driving test examiners are all walking out. I'm keen to hear from you if this affects you. I've treated the driving test examiners with a bit of disdain so far. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe they do a more vital job than I give them credit for. Anyway, up next, we will be discussing the impact of those border staff walkouts. Has it actually made much of a difference? That's next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, everybody. Right now, Border Force staff at Britain's largest airports resumed industrial action today, although you might be forgiven for not particularly noticing it in the first place, according to some reports, but we'll get stuck into that in a minute. 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union are striking for 4 days until New Year's Eve, to be replaced by those particular individuals there. If you're watching on television, it looks like someone's pumped an army costume full of custard, but there we go. Union leaders have warned the dispute could carry on for 6 months if the government refuses to negotiate. Joining me now is Kevin Saunders, former Border Force chief. Kevin, great to have you on the show. Look, I'm a fan of Border Force. I've always been saying that we need more of them, and I've been saying that they need to be allowed to do their job more properly. But in this case, the reports I'm reading so far is that the disruption to them not being at work has actually been minimal.
Yes, seems to be so.
Right.
It would seem that the government have got away with this. I know that some people came through one airport, landed, got in the arrival hall, and were through the arrival hall and had their bags within 18 minutes. Must be something of a record.
Yeah. Is this... Look, my concern with this is that people are being waved through and that actually it's damaging national security, but there doesn't appear to be any problem with that. And it does now lead me to the question of what's the point of the strike? It's only solidified the case that maybe they are paid a fair wage for what they do, which might be not a lot.
Right. Well, first of all, Patrick, nobody has been waved through. Every passport has been scanned. So there is... No issue there. It's very easy to scan it, and any information that you need comes up on the screen in front of you, and anybody can deal with that. The military people will not be doing the more involved people from abroad. They'll probably be only handling the Brits, which is probably 95% of the traffic anyway. So. Yeah, Border Force have got away with it this time round.
But that surely is bad for the Border Force Union, who are saying we are so vital to you that if we walk off, you are going to have to pay us loads more, meet our pay demands, otherwise we're off for good. And the government might be looking at this now and going, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you go off for good? Because things have sped up.
Yes, I mean, that is that's a valid point. The thing is that only the PCS have come out. The Immigration Service Union, which represent 20% of Border Force staff, are not on strike. So you've got that 20% anyway there. So if they were out as well, you would have a lot more of a problem. And of course...
Go on.
Sorry, if you got ISU out as well, then you would have a lot bigger problem.
Could we now not use this as a good example of why we restructure our border force and get some of these people who, I'm not trying to diminish what they do, I am literally just going off what I can see, whose absence has not really caused any problems whatsoever, in fact might have made the whole situation a lot better, and plonk them into the channel or near the channel to help us deal with a very pressing matter, i.e. the channel migrant crisis? Could we divert these border force officers there instead of at airports?
No, you couldn't, because it's chalk and cheese. Okay. The people that are dealing with the cross-channel migrants are our enforcement people, not the frontline passport people. And I mean, these guys that run the controls are quite highly skilled. I mean, in my day, I would have officers that spoke virtually every single European language at my disposal. So if somebody came through with, for example, an Italian ID card, I would have an officer who could speak Italian, who could speak to that person straight away and find out whether they were Italian or whether they weren't. So that's very important.
OK, Kevin, look, thank you very, very much. Kevin Saunders there, former head of UK Border Force, just reacting to the fact there are more Border Force strikes. They're going to be striking up until New Year's Eve. As it currently stands, yes, we are not making this up, as unbelievable as it sounds. All of the reports are suggesting that the fact that they've gone on strike literally has made no difference whatsoever to the efficacy of people being able to come in and out of the country at various different UK airports, which I think is a massive backfire from the PCS union, because clearly the point of a strike is you want to cause disruption. Apparently the point of this strike has been to highlight that maybe they don't need a pay rise. Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Middle-class families could be lumbered with an effective tax rate of, get this, up to 96% in 2023. What's the point? What's the point of doing anything if you're going to lose 96% of it, eh? That's thanks to the intricacies of the child welfare system, which we'll get stuck right into. We'll have the latest on that next, but first, here's your latest headlines with the wonderful Raymundo.
33 minutes past 3, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. West Midlands Police arrested a 22-year-old man in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old man was arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Meanwhile, driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres. On the rail network, TSSA union members are also on strike, causing disruption on Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but his condition is under control. The former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. And the government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 people with direct links to the UK due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. A Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims that the UK is inciting riots within the country. We're on TV, online and on DAB Plus radio. You're watching GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, right at the top of the show, you may remember that we discussed quite a shocking story, actually, about a Prevent counter-terrorism report that is not being reported, it's not being published because of an alleged cabinet row. And that row, as we understand it, centres around, well, pretty much one thing: whether or not the report would offend certain sectors of the Muslim community. Now, this is a concern for a lot of people. Supposedly 6,000 people a year are referred to the Prevent scheme. Now, it's important as well to say, and it is genuinely important, that the number of far-right referrals is massively on the increase, as well, of course, as the number of Islamist-related referrals. But the latest on this is that supposedly anyway, some groups who receive funding from the Prevent scheme actually, this report says, are linked to terrorism and to extremism, OK? And they don't want to name them just in case they face legal action. This has annoyed a lot of people now because it can lead to the presumption anyway that some groups of people are some kind of protected species, and people may find that a little bit distasteful. And Stuart says, innocent British people have already been murdered in bombings and knife attacks because of political correctness. Now is not the time for political correctness. Get your views coming in on this. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I suspect that the vast majority of the British public will not want political correctness getting in the way of real, hardcore action taking place when it comes to counter-terrorism in this country. But we're going to move away from that now and return to it at the top of the next hour, because another story that I think will get a lot of you going is about the money in your pocket, or lack of, because middle-class families could be staring down the barrel of an effective tax rate of up to 96% next year. That's thanks to a crossover of two child welfare systems. A mix between the income levels at which universal credit and child benefits are withdrawn could result in a sharp increase for the numbers of families hit. Yes, if you're anything like me, initially this report went slightly over my head, but no worries, because economics editor and indeed expert, easy for me to say, Vicky Price, is joining me now to discuss this. Vicky, there we go, we got it out in the end. Vicky, what does this really mean? The headline seems absolutely shocking here. Middle-class families at risk of 96% tax rate. Surely that can't be true.
Well, I'm afraid it can. Another question, of course, is how many families find themselves paying quite so much. But according to the Resolution Foundation, something like 3 million families are likely to be paying or having an effective tax rate of over 60%, possibly 69%. And if you add various other items, then that percentage of the effective tax rate increases even further. And that's the real worrying thing. So it's a large number that pay still a very high effective tax rate, not necessarily the 96%. And that is because, exactly as you said at the beginning, it is the fact that particularly when you reach the 50,000 plus a little bit threshold, when you start paying higher income tax rate, and you have also the child benefit being gradually reduced as a result, because that's also the threshold there. Plus, a number of people get universal tax benefits even at that high, supposedly, income level, because they have other expenses, very big issues about children, big issues about housing. It's then that this starts becoming a really important one. So it's not worth it sometimes.
But it's not their overall income, right? So it's not, let's say someone's on £50,270 a year, which is apparently here where the top rate kicks in, one of the top rates kicks in. And some people would say that they shouldn't be receiving child welfare benefits or universal credit anyway on that kind of money.
Well, you could, but of course we do know full well that childcare costs are very, very significant for everyone. I mean, women trying to get back to work, for example, but also in a number of cases you have, quite a lot of children. Yes, it is true that benefits now are restricted to just the first two children, but you do actually need the type of support to also keep you in, the type of housing which is necessary for your family. So you can still claim in exceptional circumstances. So we're not saying that everyone is affected in the same way, but what has been happening over the last few years, and of course is now being extended to 2028 by the Chancellor, is that all those personal allowances, you can think whatever you like about whether giving any child support makes sense or not. But if you do, and you keep that allowance frozen, which has already been the case for the last 10 years, you can see that you can very, very easily get into a position where that is withdrawn very, very fast at a certain level, which means that every extra pound you get, you're keeping very, very little as a result of that. So not worth it, really.
So it's 96... I've just had an email in about this, and I want clarity on it myself anyway, actually. So it could be 96% of every pound in benefits you receive over a certain level. So the actual headline of middle-class families at risk of 96% tax rate is just on, it's 96% of a certain proportion of their income.
Yes, it is on the extra that you're receiving. So it's not the overall income, it's just the extra that you're getting. And that's the effective rate.
Yeah, and that extra is based around, look, can I just say this? Having too many kids than you can actually afford without this help.
Possibly you have extra costs, housing costs. It may not have much to do with children, but it could be also about the factors. So you had been displaced some time ago and you still need some support. You may not have had the job for a while, or whatever it is that still gives you the allowance of being able to get some cash from your local council, for example, and some support. It can happen. It doesn't happen very often. But remember, the really important issues have to do with the fact that over 50,000, what happens is that you start paying a lot more in terms of income tax. And of course, your national insurance contributions are affected on everything else, but up to a point. But mostly, you get over a certain point where your tax increases very significantly. And also remember that at the higher level, you start getting your personal allowance also being reduced. So we all have a personal allowance of over £12,000. We start paying tax at that. If you're nearing, say, 100,000, then what happens, you may consider that's too much and nobody worries about that. But nevertheless, what tends to happen then is you start losing your personal allowance until you get to 125,000, where not only do you lose it completely, but also, of course, you start paying the higher rate of income tax now. So there are all sorts of positions you find yourself in where you don't think that it is worth getting an extra pay rise.
OK, I can understand that. One very, very quick one, should be hopefully quite easy to fill in. Helen in Wales has just been on, has said, can you please clarify whether or not this is all of the UK or just England and Wales? That's Helen's question to you.
It's a very good point. It should be England and Wales because, of course, Scotland has its own tax system.
Good stuff. Vicky, thank you very much, as ever. Vicky Price there, economist extraordinaire. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, whether or not that affects you, let me know if it does. Let me know whether or not you think that maybe, just maybe, people should not be having too many kids if they can't afford to have them. Maybe that's just the cynic in me. 2022 will be, however, the warmest year on record for the UK. That's according to provisional figures from the Met Office. The annual average temperature across the country will have exceeded the previous record set in 2014. That was almost 10 degrees centigrade. So the record figure coincides with fresh warnings that parts of the UK will see ice, heavy rain and potential flooding in the next few days. Joining me to discuss this and the year in weather is Jim Dale. He's a senior meteorologist at British Weather Services and a friend of the channel as well. Jim, what's in store for us then? What's coming round the corner? Because we're hearing things like it's the hottest year on record and then I'm reading out that we're all expecting a load of ice.
Yeah, it's good afternoon, Patrick. It's kind of normal at this time of year to get a bit of ice, isn't it, and a bit of snow, especially Scotland way, which is basically where that's going to be. The rest of us are going to be in the tram lines from the Atlantic, picking up the reservoirs that are out there of rain, drizzle. We get the occasional, like tomorrow won't be too bad a day for most of us. But look, we're in the conveyor belt, so that's what we can expect now until the end of this particular year. And as you just mentioned, the warmest on average on record. So this is a bad day for climate change denialists, and so I'm quite happy about today. You know, in a strange way.
Well, I did wonder actually whether or not people who do bang on rather a lot about climate change secretly quite want there to be very, very extreme climate disasters, so it proves them to be right, Jim.
Not really, no. It's just the result of it, if you see what I'm trying to say. Now, look, everything that happens in terms of disasters, in terms of weather-related, isn't all down to climate change. You've got to join the dots. I always say this. It's one of those things. Even what's happening in the United States, it's not necessarily a climate event on its own. We've had cold spells before, freezing spells, but that one arguably is unprecedented in terms of the depth of it, the degree, the snow that's involved in places like Buffalo. But ourselves, if we're looking back at 2022, I've kind of broke it back into three sections. So if I can just sort of give you that one. 2022, January and February, we're looking at the storms. Storm Malik, Storm Corrie, Storm Dudley, Storm Eunice, the big one. And Storm Franklin, and then followed by Storm Gladys. That was all between the 28th of January and the 23rd of February. These are all named storms. Now, Eunice was the biggie. You're showing some nice pictures at this moment in time. 122 miles per hour recorded. The largest gust recorded in England was at the Needles, actually, that little thing that point that sticks out on the Isle of Wight. Sadly, it did kill 4 people and £360 million of the damage. Not just ourselves in the UK, but beyond that into Europe as well, many parts of Europe. And right, its tail, Storm Franklin, floods occurred. It was the conveyor belt, not quite the conveyor belt we see at this moment in time. It was a lot worse than that, feeding that stuff in. So, no, we don't look forward to this. We warn about this. This is what climate denialists basically hang off, that they say it's just a weather event and we get used to it and all the rest of it. But no, one after another, and as you just mentioned about the temperature profile, dare I say it, the next section I'm going to look at is the summer. Can you forget that one? 28th of July, record temperature 40.3 degrees, or on old money, as our government likes to go back to, 104.5 degrees F. That was in Coningsby in Lincolnshire. And we all know about the extended drought that occurred roughly from June all the way through August time, even though the spring was drought as well in the south. And then we had those wildfires to follow as well. We don't often see wildfires. We see heath fires occasionally in places like the Pennines. But for me, wildfires, in all my time as a meteorologist, I've never seen them in this country. And to see those houses ablaze in parts of the southeast was incredible, to say the least. And then we finished off with the troll from Trondheim, as you'll remember quite nicely.
Yes.
Because I named it. Yes, you got it.
You named it. Exactly, yes, exactly. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was well in advance. I'm not saying that was necessarily a climate change event, but when you put all of these things together, and then you look back at the last decade or the last 15 years and say 10 of those years have been the warmest on record, and here we are now, the Met Office suggesting that this one is the top of the shop. And then you look globally, because you have to. You can't just look at this and say, oh, it's just the UK and we're having a bad moment or a bad couple of years. You've got to look at other places. So the Pakistani floods, for example, glaciers melting in the Himalayas. It took time to occur, but when it did, it was devastating and many, many lives lost. As I say, join the dots around the globe. And that, I'm going to say to you, Patrick, that's going to continue in 2023. The Met Office have already said, not just the Met Office, the World Meteorological Organization, the same, saying it will be another very hot year. We have to stand by for the kind of things that we've seen in 2022.
OK, Jim, thank you very much. That is Jim Dale there, who is a senior meteorologist at British Weather Services and, of course, the not creator of the troll from Trondheim, but the namer of the troll from Trondheim. Well, throughout the day, we're going to be discussing the latest strikes as well across the UK. One area where staff have walked out is in Border Force Border Control. The PCS union is in the first of a 4-day strike. We spoke a little bit earlier on with the former head of British Border Force, who actually just acknowledged the fact that this has apparently, anyway, had very little impact. The first round of strikes had very little impact, and if anything, actually made things a bit more efficient. But let's find out if it is actually causing any disruption. Maybe things have changed. We can speak now to our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, who's at Gatwick Airport. Yes, Theo, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. It's good to see you. I saw you a little bit over Christmas. You put a shift and a half in, my good man. But what are things like at Gatwick Airport at the minute? Chaos or not?
Well, it's been one of those days, business as usual here at Gatwick Airport. So they are just one of 6 airports, but also including the port of Newhaven in the south of England, which ferries people across the channel. But here today it's been business as usual. Gatwick Airport have told us things inside are running smoothly. They've got military personnel, they've got people in there who are helping people in and out of the airport. Now, Gatwick Airport have said for people who do want to come here from inside the UK that they should bring food, water, just in case they do find themselves in queues. But there are, of course, e-gates which people can use, and they have been doing so today. So in terms of delays, there haven't been many delays actually today. Things have been running pretty smoothly.
OK, well, fingers crossed that continues. And they're going on strike until New Year, Theo, I believe.
Yes, that's right, until the 31st. So today is the first day and they'll be finishing on the 31st. There is some disappointment, though, potentially for PCS union members. This afternoon, we heard from 10 Downing Street saying they aren't prepared to offer double-digit pay rises. At the moment, PCS union members, around 1,000 of them who have walked out, have been offered 2%. But they have cited in a survey recently, part of their campaign, saying that cost of living is squeezing the pockets of many of their workers.
Theo, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go inside and get warm because it sounds and looks absolutely horrendous weather-wise where you are at the minute, my good man. So thank you very much. Theo Chicomba there, who's our national reporter. He's outside Gatwick Airport. And look, ladies and gentlemen, of all of the strike disruption that we have had with nurses walking out and paramedics, ambulance workers, all of that stuff, rail workers, it does appear that the least effective of these strikes, I think by some margin, appears to be the members of the Border Force who've gone on strike at a variety of different airports across the UK. I am reading even more reports in front of me now that say the service has become more efficient without them. So there you go. Anyway, right. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads more to come in the next hour, including, yes, I will be going to your emails. The thing that has popped off most today is the question I've been asking you about whether or not we should publish the Prevent Terror report in full.
Hello Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir, and here's your weather update. Your headlines: breezy, if not windy. We're seeing outbreaks of rain towards the north, showers to follow, and a little sunshine in the mix. Low pressure centred across Ireland. Strongest winds Irish sea coast through the evening, as well as southern coast. This weather front clears eastern counties of England and it pivots across Scotland, so more wet weather to come here with some hill snow. So let's pick up on that rain. The rain stretches towards Shetland and Orkney. Strong winds here. Returns to western Scotland as another batch of rain moves from Wales, West Country, northern England towards more eastern areas. Further showers also likely across Northern Ireland, and they will be heavy. Cold in the north to start the day on Thursday, and with that, some showery bursts of rain. Sunshine and showers for England and Wales. So through the day, you can see some really quite wet weather across the central belt. That will clear. Still some showers filing in on a strong wind, and a cluster of showers keeps Northern Ireland rather wet as well. Further south, most of the showers will be further south and west across England and Wales. They could be heavy at times, with some sunshine coming through further east, where you'll see the driest interludes, but even here, 1 or 2 showers just coming through. Temperatures then a notch down on today. Some clearer skies overnight on Thursday into Friday morning will allow for some ice towards the northeast as this batch of rain arrives across Northern Ireland, clips the Isle of Man, northwest England, and moves up across Scotland. Now, there's a rain warning enforced from 3 a.m. on Friday across central and southern parts of Scotland as this rain pushes ever northwards. And again, the risk of some snow above around 300 metres. Elsewhere on Friday, you'll see more in the way of cloud as another batch of rain arrives from the southwest and brighter skies further east, where you'll see a cold start to the day on Friday. So that's the picture through the next few days. What's the outlook as we head into the weekend? Well, further rain will clear on Saturday. The winds then lose their sting. We'll see some dry skies, rain in the southeast on New Year's Day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here now on GB News. Now, there's been a massive fallout in Cabinet, supposedly, over reforms to the Prevent Anti-Terrorism Scheme. According to the Times newspaper, Suella Braverman and Michael Gove have been embroiled in a bit of a dust-up. It's over recommendations about how the scheme needs to be changed. We'll have the latest on that. The concern is that actually they are trying to protect various different groups with links to elements of the Muslim community so that they don't lose the relationship there. I think that might be a bit rum, if you ask me. Anyway, and if someone breaks into your house, will they actually get nicked by the police? Well, probably not, because new figures show that police failed to find suspects in over 1 million theft cases last year. I've got that, I've got your strikes, I've got your views, GBviews at gbnews.uk, and a big one that we're going to dissect very shortly, and I want to hear from you on, is should the Prevent report be published in full? Are we too afraid of offending some members of the Muslim community? GBviews at gbnews.uk, but before that, it's your headlines.
One minute past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were there at the time. His family say their hearts were broken following his death. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old man was arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres in the east of England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Downing Street is urging unions and employers to reach an agreement. The Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Calder, told us public support is waning.
From the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but his condition is under control and he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
The words of Pope Francis. Religious journalist Luke Seneville says the Vatican is now in uncharted territory.
If the Pope Benedict dies, it will be the very first time that a Pope dies, an emerite Pope, Pope Emerite dies in the Vatican. So it will be all new. We don't know exactly, even if the Vatican has prepared things, we don't know exactly what will be organized and how it will be organized.
In other news, 2 children under the age of 10 have died with strep A in Scotland. Public Health Scotland says 7 people in total have now died from the invasive infection in the country since October. It comes as NHS England data shows that strep A is driving near record demand for NHS 111 helpline services. At least 19 children have died across the UK from the disease. The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 individuals with direct links to the UK due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. The Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims that the UK is inciting riots within the country and called on Iran to stop holding foreign nationals for diplomatic leverage. The north-east of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor could take place in May of 2024 after a consultation process. Well, over in the US, the number of people who've died in the city of Buffalo has risen to 32 as the country continues to battle a deadly winter storm. Authorities in New York State have been digging out vehicles from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall. At least 60 people have died nationwide as the monster storm has battered North America over the last week. Well, meanwhile, here in the UK, provisional figures from the Met Office show that this year has been the warmest on record. By the end of the year, 2022 will have seen the highest annual average temperature. It beats the record set in 2014 of just under 10 degrees Celsius. The Met Office says every month, apart from December, has been warmer than average. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Let's get back to Patrick.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Let's get stuck right into the top story of the day. It's been reported that a long-awaited overhaul of the Prevent counter-terror programme has been delayed because of a row between the Home Secretary and the Levelling Up Secretary. Supposedly, it might run deeper than that and actually indicate some issues amongst our civil service, our woke civil service. Well, a report was expected to criticise the number of organisations and highlighted some Prevent-funded groups promoting, supposedly, extremist narratives. So, naming and shaming some groups who receive funding from the Prevent programme who, allegedly anyway, actually promote extremism. Well, Michael Gove is supposedly not buying into the fact that we shouldn't be naming and shaming these groups. Apparently, some members of the Home Office are actually afraid of the fact that they might be sued, but also, as well, of stirring up tensions, stirring up distrust and having them pull out of the Prevent scheme altogether. Members of the public may well feel a little bit let down here. Has the PC Brigade got involved yet again with counter-terror? Joining me now is Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism and UK operations at the Ministry of Defence. Thank you very much for joining us again. Bit of a complicated one, layers to it, it must be said. At its crux, is there any chance whatsoever that some Home Office civil servants are, well, frankly, too afraid of offending elements of the Muslim community to highlight the fact that some of those groups might actually still be promoting extremism?
Well, there shouldn't be, because it's an independent review, but like all these things, there's both presentational and political aspects. And that's why this thing has actually taken so long. So the Prevent review originally came out of the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act in 2019, and Lord Carlisle was supposed to be the guy who did the review. There were 10 Muslim groups who took a court case against him to prevent him doing that. So there's always a spectrum of people who put the word controversial in front of Prevent, when of course it is not controversial in the sense that it is safeguarding people from going along a linear path, it sometimes isn't linear, towards taking part in a terrorist act. So it is safeguarding the vulnerable, and that includes young people. So in my view, it should be all independently applied. But if you're writing an independent report in a sage and wise way, it is probably pretty farcical to be upsetting people, because you can do it in a careful and considered manner. And I can say that because I have written an independent review for the government, which was laid before Parliament.
But also, if it's true and you can prove it, then you shouldn't really have much of a risk of being sued, or if it offends people, then that's not really your problem, is it? If it's true and you can prove it. And the concern here, I'm just reading now, the report is expected to criticise several organisations and highlight how some Prevent-funded groups have promoted extremist narratives. And I think the British public deserve to know who they are, don't they?
Yeah, and I think that they probably do. If you were to look up the 10 groups who took against Lord Carlisle, I mean, they're all laid out there. And they have a wider agenda, which is they actually want to get rid of all counter-terrorist legislation and roll the clock back so that they can further extremist views. And that is one of the reasons, for example, and I don't know if it will be mentioned in the report, that we should absolutely not, for example, have a blasphemy law in the future, because as soon as you introduce that sort of legislation, then the law, including European law, will hold you to account for that. It is better to let people, be rabid about these things rather than not.
Yeah. And so there is a chance then that some groups who actually really do want to instill radical Islam in the United Kingdom are potentially using racism and the label of racism as a way of hiding their identity and their true intentions, scaring people off them.
Yeah, because indeed some of the groups actually said that this was both racist and Islamophobic. Now, I can tell you it's not, that the Counter-Terrorist Command and MI5 follow the threat. They don't follow the ideology. And if the threat is, at the moment, 75% Islamist of those in prison and 75% of the cases, that is where they follow the threat. If the highest priority threat, priority 1 alpha, is attack planning, and that is a right-wing extremist or a left or anarchist, they will follow that first. That is the way it works in the terrorist world.
So why are people even more scared of members of the Muslim community?
Well, one of the participants at the Home Secretary's Weekly is, of course, the DCLG, the Department for Cohesion and Local Government. So, they have a role to play in this and can have a view on all this, but the independent reviewer should say it as it is, and you manage the consequences of that.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely nail-on-head stuff, isn't it? Which is, if this is the reality and this is an independent report, then, frankly, censoring it, I think, is pretty dodgy. If the consequences are unpalatable, that's because there is an unpalatable problem that surely needs to be dealt with, Chip.
Well, really, it's to do with the recommendations. So if you look at all the recommendations which have touched on this area before, which is the last one was the Casey Review in 2016, it actually mentioned there about kumbaya politics. If you're in the business of not offending people, if you want to get to the core of the business, as was the same from the Cantle report, which came after the race riots in the early part of this century, you're not going to get anywhere. Politicians at certain times need to take decisive action. But having said that, I do always say that we've got to be careful of threat inflation, because so far this year, no one in the UK has been killed in a terrorist act.
Well, and actually, this leads me on to a couple of questions, which is that if some of these groups are named and shamed, as it were, and that really annoys them, could they pull out of the Prevent scheme altogether, and would that make things more dangerous?
Well, the Prevent scheme is actually a multi-agency scheme, and the part where people get involved is to do with making sure that they're going off this pathway. It is not a de-radicalisation program at all, and that's sort of misunderstood by people. It's that safeguarding thing and early intervention. If people are already radicalised, that will come into the pursue camp, i.e. it will be in the bailiwick of Counter-Terrorist Command and MI5 from the off.
And this is part of the complaint here, which is that some of these groups who are supposed to be doing just that, which is veering people away from that path, might actually be encouraging people to take that path. A little bit of a controversial question, this, Chip, but there's a massive relevance to it here, so I'll ask it, which is that by not publishing this in full, and if the narrative is pushed, or the reality is pushed, frankly, that there is a little bit of a cover-up going on here because people don't want to offend areas of the Muslim community, could that actually lead to more far-right terrorism? Because could that not basically lead people down the route of thinking, well, if the government isn't doing anything about it, then I might?
Yeah, there's certainly the potential of that. There's a thing called reciprocal radicalisation. And if your narrative is that, this big government or deep government is concealing these things, that can be something which would tip you over the edge. And indeed, the one attack we have seen recently was to do with that sort of thinking, with the attack at Manston by a 66-year-old. And not only is Prevent looking at the very young, because there are people who are sort of youth on youth radicalised, but also there are those who are very old. So the guy was 66. I think his name was Andrew Leake, the guy who went down to Manston and tried to firebomb it.
So just finally, your personal recommendation as someone with a massive brief in this stuff, former head of counter-terrorism and UK operations at the Ministry of Defence, you would recommend that they publish this report in full and we just deal with the consequences of that?
If it's an independent review, that's what should be done.
Good stuff. Thank you very, very much. That is Major General Chip Chapman, their former head of counter-terrorism and UK operations at the MOD. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? I imagine the emails will be flooding in thick and fast on that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to go to the inbox shortly, but we're just going to cover something else before I do, and that is rail passengers across Britain are being warned to expect disruption into the new year, with rail strikes set to continue. Union barons have said they want to now introduce loyalty cards to artificially expand picket line numbers. The union-backed Strike Map organisation is offering prizes to left-wing activists who attend multiple picket lines, regardless of whether they have any personal involvement in a series of bitter pay disputes. RMT union members at Network Rail will resume strikes over pay and conditions on Tuesday the 3rd and Wednesday the 4th of January. Joining me now is Rob Williams, Socialist Party industrial organiser and trade unionist. I hope you had a fabulous Christmas, Rob. It's great to have you back on the show. This smacks of absolute desperation. I thought they had the public support, widespread public support. Now you've got to dish out loyalty cards to trots so they can go across multiple picket lines on every single day. It's sad.
I think the desperation is this story, to be honest. Strike Map is an organisation that helps build solidarity for disputes. It's probably just a promotion. It's certainly not the trade union leader. Strike Map does a useful role in showing support, just like the National Shop Stewards Network does. Honestly, it's an absolute non-story, and it'll be a badge of honour for Strike Map that the Daily Mail, don't forget, the Daily Mail of the hurrah for the black shirts in the 1930s is angry. So if they've incurred the wrath of the Daily Mail, then it's a badge of honour for Strike Map. It's got nothing to do with the disputes, only building support and solidarity. Nothing wrong with that.
Just going forward then, I take it, strike action planned. Are you concerned that more generally public support for them might wane? The strikes have been a bit saturated, really, haven't they? Apparently even driving examiners are off today.
Well, first of all, I give support and solidarity to all those trade unions, the RMT, the PCS, all those unions that are taking action, Unite, whatever. Look, the issue here is that the government is intent on, doesn't want to negotiate. It's I believe, behind the role that the Royal Mail and the rail companies' management are playing as well. The issue is that if people are worried about disputes, well, there's a solution, isn't there? The government and the employers should be negotiating with the trade unions. What the government and the employers are putting on the table right now are effectively massive pay cuts, not giving anything. They're giving massive pay cuts to their members who've got no option but to take action.
Is there a concern, a little bit like we've seen with some of the border force strikes at CPS at a variety of different airports across the UK, that it might turn out that the service is a lot more efficient without them being there?
Well, if it's so efficient, then why are people complaining? The truth is that workers do the jobs every day. It's like you, Patrick. If you didn't turn up, there'd be no programme, but I'm sure the cameraman...
If I didn't turn up, Rob, if I didn't turn up, you and I both know that nobody would care. But I appreciate what you're saying, yes. The viewing figures would probably go through the roof and a new star would be born. But yes, I do take your point. But when it comes to the cost of these strikes, I find it hard to understand if it's going to cost us around 30 million quid a day for various different rail sectors to go on strike, for example, and we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. How on earth is the government going to be able to afford to give you the pay rise that you want, which, by the way, neither political party wants, if you're making the country even poorer?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute scandal that Labour isn't supporting the strikes, isn't in favour of workers getting inflation-proofed pay rise. No question about that. But the fact is that the employers and the government would rather waste money bringing in all the sort of, the things they're bringing in to try and defeat the action. Look, on the point you made earlier, the strikes are still incredibly popular. Why are they popular? Because people like your channel, people like the media, people like the government cannot divide workers at the moment because all workers are facing a cost of living crisis. And actually, I think they're glad there's someone standing up against this government and the employers.
But to be honest with you, I've got to point out that's just untrue, because people can divide the workers in the sense of public popularity. We know that ambulance workers have a popularity poll of around 63% for their strike action, nurses around 65%, and rail workers are way down the bottom there towards 44%. So, I mean, actually, people do have a priority of people, and when it comes to the rail workers, I'm sorry, but the public don't really see them as the priority.
Well, I think the fact that the rail workers have been taking action for 6 months, have had a torrent of propaganda against them by the media, and still that even on the figures you're quoting, nearly half of people are supportive of them. That's a majority, actually. And that's because they see their dispute as warranted. It's not just about pay on the rails, it's also about keeping it a safe service for people as well. So people support it, just like they support the renationalisation of the rails, just like they support the renationalisation of Royal Mail and the energy companies.
I get what you're saying, which is that, reading between the lines there, that the public now are not supporting this as much as they could be doing as a result of what you would call propaganda. That is the kind of thing that a dictator would say.
No, I think on the contrary, it's no in between the lines. I think the workers in general support the action that's been taken. Actually, what's coming across on picket line after picket line, and again, this is not some conspiracy, workers are drawing the conclusion they should take action together. And that's not conspiracy talking. That's because workers feel the crisis.
But is this where the issue is, though? Is this where the issue is, which is that workers taking strike actions together, all of a sudden it starts to look like a general strike. All of a sudden Mick Lynch's rhetoric, I'm just singling him out here, but his rhetoric appears to be going more in that direction. The Labour Party don't support you, and basically it's starting to look a little bit like some kind of radical socialist communist putsch. And this country is not radically socialist or communist, is it?
Well, I tell you what this country does do, is that this country knows that working class people over the last decades have been taken for a ride. They know the privatisation has not been in their interest. They know that the rich are getting richer, the poorer are getting poorer. So as far as working class people are concerned, they know that society is skewed against them, and I believe are supportive of those workers taking action for a decent pay rise against the cost of living crisis.
OK, all right. Well, I will leave it there. Thank you very much. And I do genuinely hope you had a wonderful Christmas as well, my good man, and you have a lovely new year. I'm sure I'll speak to you in between now and then. You're on every day. It's Rob Williams there, Socialist Party industrial organiser, trade unionist. He's always game for a bit of back and forth. You love to see it. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, police failed to find any suspects in more than 1 million theft cases in England and Wales last year. I've just spoken to you about how there might be some great big cover-up going on when it comes to radical Islamist terror. Well, certainly no cover-up going on when it comes to burglaries. They're just not solving them by the looks of things. We'll speak to former Chief Superintendent of the Met on just what's going wrong. That is all coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, in just a tick.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, last year, police were unable to find any suspects at all in over 1 million theft cases in England and Wales. There's also been a decline in the proportion of crimes in which someone is charged. That is down to just 5.4%. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said that Suella Braverman has no plan to turn this around and is instead obsessed with gimmicks rather than a serious plan to catch more criminals. Labour clearly trying to position themselves as being more tough on crime. A tough ask, I think, if you ask me, given the fact that the serving Labour London Mayor appears to have basically denounced the British police force on a regular basis, something he would no doubt deny, but there we go, and stop and search, etc. doesn't seem to be priority number one in the Labour Party. Anyway, I can now welcome former Detective Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police, Shabnam Chowdhury, to the programme. Shabnam, thank you very, very much. I read with absolute disgust today something on the front of the Mail. Mother knifed to death by burglars as she protected her family. And I suppose as long as, well, around 1 million burglars know that they're not going to get caught or even questioned, unfortunately, this kind of stuff's going to keep happening, isn't it?
Well, that's a real tragic and extreme case, and it's absolutely awful. But let's put it the other way around, that 1 million victims have come to police, reported crimes, burglaries and thefts, and they've been unsolved. So over 1 million victims have been let down, despite the fact that they had the courage to come forward with the hope that they could trust the police to solve those crimes. A very, very sad situation for victims and a terrible situation for policing.
What can be done about this? Is it just more police? Because my concern is if we've got rid of something like 20,000 of them, and crucially, the police stations, I do reports all the time on police stations closing, even if we recruited a load more, where will we put them?
Well, it's not a question of recruiting a load more. You're just making up for the numbers that we've lost in the first instance. Policing have lost something like 20,000 police officers. Now the government are making these numbers up by recruiting more police officers. They're not actually recruiting more. They're just trying to make up for what they've lost out in the first place. You just mentioned earlier on that the crime solvency for investigations of burglaries and crimes like that are 5.4%. 7 years ago, it was 15%, which isn't great, but it certainly was a lot better. When you put a whole load of different situations together, for example, lack of resources, lack of experience. Some officers are not particularly interested in going around to a house and investigating a crime, let alone reporting it. There's a big difference between reporting one and actually going in and investigating, doing house-to-house inquiries, looking at all the other things like forensics, cameras, all those sorts of things. Police officers are swamped because of the fact that they're dealing with mental health issues, they're dealing with missing persons every single day of the week. They are social workers as well as they wear a number of different other hats. In the process, all that happens is those victims that desperately want the support of police, that have to deal with one of the most horrendous crimes, which is burglary, having somebody breaking into their homes and invading their privacy, and then finding that even when they provide the evidence to the police, they're not being solved. They're not being brought to justice, these horrible criminals who then go out and continue to perpetrate those crimes.
I don't want to knock our police force. They do get a lot of criticism for things like doing the Macarena at gay pride events and things like that. And yeah, all right, I get a bit wound up about that, especially when I read articles about the fact that there's only a conviction rate or something of a 5.4%. And I do understand all of this, but why would anyone want to go into policing right now? Every single time you stop and search someone, it sounds like you're going to end up in some kind of inquest. You've got various different political figures at pains to say the police force is institutionally racist and misogynistic. The pay, I don't think, is fantastic, is it really? And as you've said there, you end up dealing with a lot of, well, social work. You are like a mental health provider as opposed to actually going out and being a police officer. Is it fair to say that realistically now, well, it's pretty unappealing to become a police officer, isn't it?
It is unappealing, Patrick, but the bottom line is this, that, look, I policed for more than 30 years. I had my highs and I had my lows, but I did my job with passion and with compassion, and I loved it. And I loved being a detective, and I loved investigating crimes, and I loved working with teams that were absolutely brilliant. The bottom line is this, you talk about all the Macarena and the, all the other things that you talk about, misogyny, sexism, racism. Yes, the fact is, those issues do exist in policing, and it's absolutely right that policing is held to account, because police officers have huge amount of powers, and they can take the liberty away from members of the public. They can put them in handcuffs.
But they're not far too often, are they?
They can do strip searches, all those things that they're...
They're not
far too often.
Well, far too often. Because we've only got a conviction rate of something like 5.4%, and a million burglaries aren't going solved, or even a suspect being identified. The question I would argue there, well, they're not taking that many people's liberty away, are they?
Well, they are taking people's liberties away, whether it's one person or whether it's 50,000 people. The fact is they have strong powers. They have legislation that they have to hand that they could use. I agree with you that the investigative rate, the fact that bringing people to justice is poor. The fact is the government reduced policing by 20,000 officers, and they're trying to make up the shortfalls. They're not increasing police officers, they're just making up for the numbers that they took away in the first instance. And that is one of the biggest issues that policing faces at the moment.
I agree with you completely on that, and I think it's utter madness that we expected to try to do law and order on the cheap, and then lo and behold, there would be some different result than the one that we see before us today. Thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. That's Shabnam Chowdhury there, former Detective Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. You are with me, Patrick Christys, here on GB News. I've got loads of emails coming in about our top story today, which is, could it well be that the Prevent extremism report is not being published because Home Office civil servants don't want to offend members of the Muslim community? It certainly looks that way, and it's certainly getting a lot of you very angry. I'll go to the inbox shortly, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But in another story, nearly half of junior doctors plan to quit the NHS as soon as they can. That's according to the British Medical Association. It's found that poor pay and working conditions were among the main reasons why they wanted to leave. I'll be drilling down into that with a junior doctor very shortly. That should be interesting. All of that coming your way after the latest headlines.
"4:34, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Two men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. West Midlands police arrested a 22-year-old man in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old was arrested in London. Police are appealing for any information on the weapon used in a shooting which killed a 26-year-old on Christmas Eve in the Wirral. Merseyside police say they are working to establish whether the firearm used could be connected to any other incidents in the area. Beautician Elle Edwards was fatally shot at the Lighthouse Inn on the Wirral on Christmas Eve. Police say she was not believed to have been the target of the attack. 2 people have since been arrested in connection with the incident. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Meanwhile, driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout affecting more than 70 testing centres. On the rail network, TSSA union members are also on strike, causing disruption on Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but his condition is under control. The former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 people due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. Number 10 has rejected claims that the UK is inciting riots within the country. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching GB News. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, 4 in 10 junior doctors plan to quit the NHS as soon as they possibly can, apparently. That's according to a new survey from the British Medical Association. A third of those looking at leaving are planning on working abroad. Australia is the top destination of choice. I wonder why this really is. Why do so many young doctors want to leave the health service immediately? Joining me now is Kishan Badalia, who is a junior doctor. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Are you going to quit?
Thank you. I love my job as a doctor, and I feel that I've dedicated my life to becoming a doctor. So as long as working conditions maintain or working conditions improve and I feel happy in my job, this includes working conditions and pay, then I will continue. But I'm aware that there are other options out there, and for many of my colleagues, those are very tempting options.
Can I ask, it sounds horribly personal, this, but in relation to the fact that a lot of people are leaving a taxpayer-funded service as a result of supposed poor pay, what are you paid?
Yeah. Well, it varies depending on what stage of training you're at. So typically, somebody goes through medical school for 5 years, and then after you've done that sort of 5th year of medical school, you graduate as a foundation year 1 doctor. And that is roughly £14 per hour, which could equate to around £29,000 for that first year. It goes very slightly the following year, and then throughout training very slightly, up until you're earning roughly £28 per hour, and that would be a salary of around £58,000 a year.
OK, all right. And is there a possibility to become a more specialised doctor and earn quite a bit more? My point here being, is it like any career where you start out and you gradually work your way up the pay scale?
So what I've explained just now, it starts off at about £14 per hour, then actually £58 per hour is roughly what those higher, more specialised doctors are earning. That could be a neurosurgeon with more than 10 years experience. But to be honest, it's not just about what we're earning per hour. We have to consider that we go to medical school for 5 years. Many of us graduate with up to £100,000 worth of debt. And this includes real debt, credit cards, overdrafts, bank loans to help fund those later years of university. And then we enter a job earning this amount. And, you know, we're working weekends, nights, bank holidays, taking on immense responsibility. And many junior doctors are struggling to manage financially.
So how does a load of doctors who like to come on and say they've got a load of solidarity with the medical community, with nurses, whatever, how does a lot of them leaving to go and coin it in abroad actually help matters?
It's about the working conditions.
Does that not make conditions? Does that not make working conditions worse because more of you are leaving, so there's fewer of you here in our NHS?
Well, the doctors who are working and the nurses, many of the people working with the NHS, they're feeling the strains that are on the system at the moment. So those waiting times, they're concerned about the provision of care that we can deliver to patients. And there comes a point in a person's career where they're unable to continue working in that environment. And as a result, going abroad where salaries may be higher and they're feeling more valued is a much more tempting proposition.
Why don't they study abroad to begin with?
Well, I mean, I could take myself as an example. I studied in the UK because my plan has been to work as a doctor in the UK. I went to school here, I went to medical school here, I've been working in the Midlands, and you take it year by year thinking, you know, next year I'll be doing this, in 5 years' time I hope to be specialised in this area, the plan being in the UK. But as time goes on, that's when you start to really feel the impacts of working in a difficult, challenging environment with those levels of pay. But also, interestingly, even when I was at medical school, probably when I was doing work experience before medical school, I had consultants saying to me, this probably isn't going to be the best career for your happiness. Don't do it. But I still did it because I wanted to become a doctor.
Look, I absolutely take my hat off to you, 100%. I say this every single time I introduce someone to the medical community. I have never saved a life. I've never come close to it, and certainly I don't think I'd actually be able to. So I do, absolutely hold that in high regard. One of the concerns that I have, and I say kind of as a punter, as a customer for the NHS, right, is if somebody does decide to go into a job in the NHS, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or whatever, I'm immensely grateful for them doing that, and it is a highly skilled job. But if you know what the pay is before you do it, and you know what the working conditions are like before you do it, do you now have a right to moan about it now it's happening to you?
I think we do, and I mean, point number one is we're not comparing it to other workers at all. But the main point here is that the junior doctor's pay has declined in real terms by 26% since 2008. And I mean, I entered the job thinking that the levels of pay would be sufficient to manage a lifestyle, to be able to afford my bills, that we're going through this cost of living crisis, and be able to manage comfortably. But it's only when you're actually working and in that situation that you really feel that impact. I realise that with the time, the weekends, the nights, the stress, the burdens that have come after the pandemic, that is after we have made that decision to go to medical school, we realise that that can become too much.
Does it wind you up when you see reports come out of people who are getting jobs as a director of lived experience in the NHS who can earn 150 grand a year, whereas, as you very eloquently explained to me there, the pay scale for a doctor, a junior doctor, can start around the 29,000 mark, and after a few years of medical school and dedicated service to actually saving lives, you might end up on around 59k, whereas someone who's got a woke-looking CV can earn 3 times that?
Again, it's not about comparing to other people. Everyone has their own value to bring to an organisation. As doctors...
Do you think, being honest though, mate, being honest, do you think someone who's a director of lived experience is 3 times as valuable as you are to the NHS?
Doctors are saving the lives in the NHS, and they need to be valued as such. I'm not in a position to comment on what somebody else is getting paid. I'm not happy to do so. I believe that doctors work incredibly hard. All staff who are on the ground working, saving the lives of patients, should be valued for their specialist skills, their energy, their expertise, the weekends, the on-calls, the burden and the responsibility. And the current way things are, we're not being valued in that way, and that's why doctors want to go abroad.
OK, good stuff. Well, good luck to you, and thank you for everything you do, saving lives. I might need you one day. As Kishan Badalia there, who is a junior doctor, just explaining why apparently 4 in 10 junior doctors are desperate to go abroad as soon as they've trained over here. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Get those views coming in, as ever, GBViews at gbnews.uk. But as we've been discussing throughout the course of the show, another one of our big stories today. Today marks the return of strikes across the UK. One area where staff have walked out, apparently with absolutely next to no impact whatsoever, which I think is hilarious, is our border force, our border control. But our national reporter, Theo Chikombra, has been at Gatwick Airport today, finding out what the action has actually done.
Been business as usual here at Gatwick Airport. It's one of 6 airports in the UK where PCS members who work for Border Force have walked out. For the next few days, they'll be out on the picket line until New Year's Eve, saying they want better pay and conditions in their industry. So far, they've been offered 2%, but they want 10%, which they say is more in line with inflation. As part of their campaign, they've been saying the cost of living is squeezing the pockets of many of their members, but we don't know at the moment how long these conversations are going to last for. The government say union bosses and companies need to sit on the table and figure out a deal. But of course, public sector workers we've seen across the country have been campaigning for better pay as the cost of living is squeezing the pockets of many. For now, members of the union will be walking out, and they're encouraging people to check before they travel, just in case there are delays.
Good stuff there, Theo. Thank you very, very much. Right, now, from the pay packet, Good grief, there you go. Anyway, from the pay packets of one side of the families to be squeezed to another, middle-class families could be staring down the barrel of an effective tax rate of 96% next year. That's according to reports. Now, that's thanks to a crossover of two child welfare systems, a crossover between the income levels at which universal credit and child benefits are withdrawn, could result in a sharp increase in the number of families hit. Right, joining me now is personal finance reporter from The Telegraph, Alexa Phillips. Alexa, I might have to throw over to you on this one for a second because I appear to have a frog in my throat, but there you go. What's actually going on here then? 96% sounds like a heck of a lot.
Yeah, so the reason this is happening is because of the way in which these kind of two benefit systems are withdrawn. So as you enter the income bracket between, 50,000 to 60,000, that's the point where actually, if you get a £10,000 pay rise, for some people, that actually just means an 800, taking back, £800 in your take-home pay. And the reason for this is just because of the way in which, so child benefit gets kind of withdrawn when you start to hit 50,000, then it's completely removed at 60,000. What people don't realize that there's actually there's 50,000 families that are both eligible for child benefit and universal credit. So for them, between 50,000 and 60,000, they're also getting their universal credit withdrawn. So basically, if you're in that bracket and you're affected by those things, if you add in, that's an effective tax rate of 80%, especially if you include, the income tax rate for those earning 50K. So that's what's happening there. And then if you factor in pension contributions, as well as student loan repayments, for people in that bracket, basically a pay rise doesn't pay.
Alexa, is there an argument at all with this that some people earning above a certain amount of money, so 50K plus, shouldn't really necessarily be on any form of benefits whatsoever, and or they shouldn't have kids that they can't afford?
I mean, so the interesting history with the universal credit is that a year ago, Rishi Sunak actually changed the taper rate so that people who were earning more than £50,000 could become eligible for universal credit. It was a kind of controversial measure at the time. And the reason that they sort of did this was the idea being that there was a cutoff point where it wasn't going to pay for people to come off universal credit and earn more money. So they were trying to fix this by doing this instead, by having a more gradual kind of withdrawal of universal credit. And what the report kind of says is that for single earners, if you're single parent with 3 kids, that's kind of a situation where you might be getting universal credit, or if you have really high housing costs, and that's predominantly renters who are affected by that. But I take your point that we do have to ask the question, what's going on here that people who earn £50,000 still are relying on kind of universal credit. How do we get people off of this like very expensive benefit system and incentivize them to work and to progress? I think you make a fair point, because it is the people who are facing this 96% rate, the kind of highest ones are the ones that have 3 kids. The more kids you have, the more it doesn't pay to have that child benefit withdrawn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just using a very crass example right now. I don't have kids. However, I think, if I was a multi-millionaire, I probably would have had kids by now, and as many of them as I would like. But I'm not, because at the moment I couldn't afford to have them. And I just don't quite understand why the taxpayer should necessarily be made to pay for people who decided to just have them willy-nilly. But can I ask a wider question, really, which is the current Chancellor and the current government? I'm reading headlines today, how the government waged war on the self-employed. I'm reading a headline here, middle-class families at risk of 96% tax rate. It does seem to be like everybody's getting clobbered left, right and centre at the moment by Jeremy Hunt and tax hikes, etc. Why is what Liz Truss wanted to do bad and what Jeremy Hunt is doing good?
I mean, I think there's the thing about the tax rises that we're all seeing by stealth, right? I mean, Jeremy Hunt essentially throws a bunch of tax. The reason why this is becoming an increasing problem by the end of the decade, and this report kind of says the number of people facing this effective tax rate is going to increase. Everyone's going to be paying more tax because of all these version tax threshold. I think the thing about that's worth noting, though, is he's cleaning up the mess of Liz Truss. So it was Liz Truss that spooked the markets by, having a mini budget that wasn't run by enough experts to sign off on it and say, this is sound economic policy. Markets panicked, cost of borrowing went up, and we ended up with a hole of sort of billions of pounds that now this current administration is fixing and is trying to convince us that this is only because of Ukraine, when we know full well that actually it's middle-class families that are picking up the tab for the ineptitude of the Truss administration. So I think there's an argument that Liz Truss could have done what she'd wanted, but I think there was just some real oversight in terms of getting the right sign-off from, the Office of Budget Responsibility that would have lended a lot of credibility to the policies that she wanted to make. And I think that was the kind of flaw, and that's kind of what you would expect a prime minister to be aware of, right?
The delivery and probably being a bit tin-eared as well, given the current situation of people. But look, Alexa, thank you very, very much. I found that incredibly informative. I really appreciate your insight there. Alexa Phillips there, who's financial reporter from The Telegraph. Loads coming your way. You're with Patrick Christys on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir, and here's your weather update. Your headlines: breezy, if not windy. We're seeing outbreaks of rain towards the north, showers to follow, and a little sunshine in the mix. Low pressure centred across Ireland. Strongest winds Irish sea coast through the evening, as well as southern coast. This weather front clears eastern counties of England and it pivots across Scotland, so more wet weather to come here with some hill snow. So let's pick up on that rain. The rain stretches towards Shetland and Orkney. Strong winds here. Returns to western Scotland as another batch of rain moves from Wales, West Country, northern England towards more eastern areas. Further showers also likely across Northern Ireland, and they will be heavy. Cold in the north to start the day on Thursday, and with that, some showery bursts of rain. Sunshine and showers for England and Wales. So through the day, you can see some really quite wet weather across the central belt. That will clear. Still some showers filing in on a strong wind, and a cluster of showers keeps Northern Ireland rather wet as well. Further south, most of the showers will be further south and west across England and Wales. They could be heavy at times, with some sunshine coming through further east, where you'll see the driest interludes. But even here, 1 or 2 showers just coming through. Temperatures then a notch down on today. Some clearer skies overnight on Thursday into Friday morning will allow for some ice towards the northeast as this batch of rain arrives across Northern Ireland, clips the Isle of Man, northwest England, and moves up across Scotland. Now, there's a rain warning in force from 3 a.m. on Friday across central and southern parts of Scotland as this rain pushes ever northwards. And again, the risk of some snow above around 300 metres. Elsewhere on Friday, you'll see more in the way of cloud as another batch of rain arrives from the southwest and brighter skies further east, where you'll see a cold start to the day on Friday. So that's the picture through the next few days. What's the outlook as we head into the weekend? Well, further rain will clear on Saturday. The winds then lose their sting. We'll see some dry skies, rain in the southeast on New Year's Day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News.
Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, with you right the way through until 6 p.m. And, oh yeah, I'm back on at 8 p.m. as well for Good Measure, covering for the wonderful Mark Stein. Let's crack on, though. Is a row in the Cabinet getting in the way of an overhaul to counter-terror strategy? Reports today are putting Home Secretary Suella Braverman in one corner and Community Secretary Michael Gove in the other. But what does the Westminster sniping mean for our national security? There are real concerns that a fear of offending certain elements of the Muslim community are stopping this counter-terror report from being published. I don't think that's good enough. Also, millions of thefts and burglaries in England and Wales have gone unsolved, and less than 6% of suspected crimes end with a charge. Remarkable stats. Labour have called it a disgrace. Of course they have, but I'll be asking a former detective, why on earth is this happening? And reports that some MPs have been getting boozed up and having sex on all expenses paid foreign junkets. You love to see it. Hard to believe? You ever met them? Anyway. But could it be a security risk by leaving them open to blackmail? I'll be asking a former Met police officer exactly what a risk that indeed is. I want to know what you think of all of the day's stories. Get those emails coming in. gbviews at gbnews.uk. The big one for you today, I want to know whether or not you feel as though we're too afraid, in our security forces anyway, of offending certain elements of the Muslim community to actually really crack down on terror. gbviews at gbnews.uk. But now it's time for the latest headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Patrick. 1 minute past 5, here's the latest. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were there at the time. His family say their hearts were broken following his death. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old man was arrested in London. Police are appealing for any information on the weapon used in a shooting which killed a 26-year-old on Christmas Eve in Wirral. Merseyside police say they're working to establish whether it could be connected to any other incidents in the area. Beautician Elle Edwards was fatally shot at the Lighthouse Inn. A man remains in critical condition. 2 people have been arrested in connection with that incident. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres in the east of England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Border control expert Henry Bolton says airport disruption has been minimal.
It would seem that the government have got away with this. Military people will not be doing the
the more involved people from abroad, they'll probably be only handling the Brits, which is probably 95% of the traffic anyway. So, Border Force have got away with it this time round.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but his condition is under control and he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis asked the Catholic community to keep him in their thoughts.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
Well, back here, 2 children under the age of 10 have died with Strep A in Scotland, the first to be recorded north of the border. Public Health Scotland says 7 people in total have died from the invasive infection in the country since October. Elsewhere in the UK, data from the UK Health Security Agency shows that 21 children have died from the disease in England, whilst 3 children have died in Belfast and Wales. The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 individuals due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. A Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims that the UK is inciting riots within the country and called on Iran to stop holding foreign nationals for diplomatic leverage. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor, as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor could take place in May 2024 after a consultation process. Well, provisional figures from the Met Office show this year has been the warmest on record. By the end of the year, 2022 will have seen the highest annual average temperature. It beats the record set in 2014 of just under 10 degrees Celsius. The Met Office says every month, apart from December, has been warmer than average. Senior meteorologist Jim Dale told us we'll continue to see warm weather next year.
You can't just look at this and say, oh, it's just the UK and we're having a bad moment or a bad couple of years. You've got to look at other places. So the Pakistani floods, for example, glaciers melting in the Himalayas. It took time to occur, but when it did, it was devastating and many, many lives lost. As I say, join the dots around the globe. And that, I'm going to say to you, Patrick, that's going to continue in 2023.
You're watching GB News. The People's Channel will bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Patrick.
Well, a very controversial and contentious topic to kickstart the final hour of this show. No surprise there to regular viewers and listeners, but a new report into the Prevent Anti-Terrorism programme is expected to highlight how some groups funded by the schemes, they actually take money off the scheme, have in fact been promoting an extremist narrative. But it's not being released, just not now anyway, because of a cabinet row, allegedly between Suella Braverman and Michael Gove, although more likely between Home Office civil servants and Michael Gove. According to The Times, the Home Secretary is ready to publish the independent review and accept all its recommendations in full. But Michael Gove is supposedly not buying into claims that they should redact the names of some of the groups allegedly involved in basically taking money from Prevent, a counter-terror programme, and continuing to pump extremist views into mostly young people's minds. Supposedly the narrative is that it might turn them off, it might also make sure that they don't engage with Prevent going forward, and they might actually sue people in government. But is this just one big cover-up? I can introduce now social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Hassan. Dr. Rakib, a lot of our viewers and listeners will be looking at this now and going, yet again, people don't want to offend certain sections of the Muslim community and potentially public safety is at risk as a result.
Well, I've said that all too often, Patrick, that our counter-extremism and counter-terrorism discussions are being increasingly paralysed by the forces of political correctness and identity politics. It's certainly not Islamophobic. It's not a form of anti-Muslim prejudice to point out the fact that the principal terror threat in modern-day Britain is presented by Islamist extremism. That is shown by recent figures regarding the MI5's wider terror-related watch list. Back in 2020, the figure was put in the region of 43,000. 39,000 of those individuals were Islamist extremists, so in the region of 90%. And it's also reflecting the prison population. The ideological composition of prisoners who have been found guilty of terror-related offences, once again, Patrick, predominantly made by Islamist extremists.
Dr. Rakib, we've heard police forces around the country say that one of the reasons they didn't want to get involved with the grooming gang scandal was because they didn't want to stoke racial tensions. Reading between the lines, this report is expected to criticise several organisations and highlight how some Prevent-funded groups have been actively promoting extremist narratives. I can't help but feel like here we go again. The truth would be deemed to be too much for the British public.
Well, I think that to my understanding, according to reports which were published today, the main problem here at the heart of government is that there are concerns at the Home Office over the naming of particular organisations and individuals, and the Home Office is fearful of legal action being taken against it. But I think that we certainly have to have a very serious debate about how prevent-related funding works in Britain. Are all the organisations that receive prevent funding, are they well and truly committed to cultivating anti-extremist narratives in order to fight extremist ideologies in our local communities? There's certainly a debate to be had on that front.
A source close to the author of this particular report says this: there is widespread unhappiness to the approach of the Home Office, saying we can't say this or that about organisations, redacting and removing certain bits. The author supposedly is frustrated and not buying the excuses. Potentially an implication here that Home Office civil servants are a bit too woke at the minute.
Well, I think that we've seen that Home Office civil servants have been problematic in terms of not being especially cooperative when it comes to the government's plans to shore up our national borders. I think that more generally there's also a debate to be had that within the broader prevent structure, you do have local agencies, whether that may be social services, even agencies associated with healthcare, and schools as well, that there is a possible progressive left-leaning bias, and that's being reflected in the ideological composition of cases, which are then referred to prevent. And it has been reported that one of the main criticisms of prevent is that there's an overemphasis on extreme right-wing extremism. Now, of course, that we've had numerous sources say that the fastest growing terror threat is presented by far-right extremism. We can't lose sight of the fact that the prevailing terror threat is presented by Islamist extremism.
Yeah, and if people can point to the idea now that there is taxpayers' money being used to try to stop terrorism, and Islamist terrorism specifically, and some of those groups that money is going to is actually promoting Islamist extremism, and this is an independent report, and our government steps in and tries to redact that or silence that. Dr. Rakib, I can't help but wonder whether or not that would cause more far-right ideology in the UK.
Well, I think it would be problematic, because I think what you have there is that there'd be issues surrounding transparency and openness. I think we need to wait for this particular story to develop a bit more. I think in terms of reports which have been published on matters of counter-extremism and counter-terrorism, there has to be a degree of transparency. I do understand that the Home Office may well be fearful of litigious organisations that may well be named in the report, but equally, if it's seen as some sort of institutional cover-up at the heart of government, then that would be especially problematic, and it could reduce public confidence in the government in terms of getting to grips with extremism and terrorism more broadly in the UK.
Why do you think some people are more afraid of offending the Islamic community than they are of any other community?
I think that there's a degree of political correctness when it comes to issues surrounding sections of British Muslim communities. I'd really make this point as well, Patrick, that if people are fearful of talking about Islamist extremism, they're not doing anti-Islamist British Muslims any favours at all. There are British Muslims who may not face the more violent elements of Islamist extremism, but rather that sort of non-violent Islamist extremism, that victimization and oppression that comes with that. They endure that on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's really important that we have these debates in a very open and honest manner, because ultimately it's not just doing the entire country a fundamental disservice, including British Muslims who are patriotic and are also fearful of the Islamist extremism threat.
Very finally, very quickly, would you urge them to just publish this report and hurry up with it and do it in full?
Well, I'm not going to necessarily comment on that. I think that the Home Office may well have its concerns surrounding the possibility of legal action being taken against it. But I would say this, that Home Office officials also have to be fearful that it doesn't look like an institutional cover-up on what is a very important report on the terror threat in modern-day Britain.
Dr. Rakib, thank you very much, as ever. Dr. Rakib Ahsan there, who is an expert in when it comes to extremism, etc., and anti-extremism and social policy as well. Now, nearly 1,000 passport control staff across Britain's largest airports have walked out today, although, apparently, according to reports, it's very, very hard to tell. In fact, there are some reports coming out to say that the whole thing has got a lot better. That's part of action being coordinated by the Public and Commercial Services Union. It's staging strikes for 4 days now, though, until New Year's Eve. Aviation consultant John Strickland joins me to discuss this. Now, John, great to have you on the show. I have spoken to our national reporter who's at an airport who's saying he's spoken to people inside and everything's absolutely fine. I've spoken to the former head of UK Border Force who's told me that the fact that some people are on strike has made absolutely no difference. In fact, it might have improved things somewhat. You are coming at it from an aviation perspective. Is it actually having an impact on flights, on plane companies, etc.?
Well, Patrick, so far so good. I would concur with what the other sources have told you. Things seem to have been going very smoothly. The experience was always going to differ airport by airport because of the different volumes of traffic, and arguably the one which would have faced most complexity would be Heathrow, not only because of its size and scale, but the nature of operations at Heathrow are far more long-haul flights with large aircraft, Airbus A380 double-decker aircraft, for example, and far more nationalities, meaning not so many people proportionally would be able to go through the E-gates. But even Heathrow has been having a good experience. I've checked in with them today, and things have indeed been going far more smoothly than was possibly expected. Of course, we've been fortunate that in the last few days we got rid of the last of the bad weather. A lot of the traffic in terms of UK travellers would have been outbound pre-Christmas. The next few days will be a bit of a test as people start to come back from holiday breaks, and we'll see a bit of a peak running up to the new year. So we have to hope again that we keep reasonably good weather conditions, and most importantly that the E-gates, which all British travellers bar families of youngsters can use, they have to all be fully used and they have to work. Sometimes we do break down.
I mean, at the moment, this is the worst strike ever in terms of impact of strike. There has been next to none. It's absolutely, completely, utterly pointless, the idea that they've got on strike so far. Nobody I talk to tells me there's been any impact to this whatsoever. It's good, I suppose, that maybe we have got lucky. What is the overall service normally like when it comes to the Border Force, though, at airports? I have heard previously, although this was when they were all at work, of massive, massive queues and people not being able to get on holidays. Manchester Airport, for example, was being pummeled.
Well, of course, we've had problems with staff over the last few months in all parts of the aviation activity chain, airlines, airports, handling, Border Force itself. The E-gates, again, to return to that point, are fundamental because that actually avoids people actually having to go to a passport officer to get checked, provided that they are...
Is this why they're actually on strike? Sorry to interrupt, John, but is this actually kind of the rub of it all, which is that they are now looking, these staff, at their robotic replacements, and they don't like it?
No, I don't think so. And also, apart from factors I was mentioning in terms of the good fortune, in terms of weather and the reliability of these gates, I do have a bit of personal feedback from an industry colleague. He came back into Heathrow only, I think, on Christmas Eve on the 23rd of December. He's a UK resident, doesn't have UK nationality. He was obliged to go to a passport desk, and it was an army official working. And he said what happened there was the particular officer in charge put the wrong stamp on his passport, gave him a 6-month stay when in fact he's got unlimited residency. So he's actually been pretty stressed about that because it's completely wrong and means that should he leave the UK and want to come back beyond 6 months, he could have problems. Now he's going to take that up with Border Force to make sure that's right. It's just indicative that you cannot expect military personnel who are very, very capable, of course, in running crisis situations, but they can't deliver all the essential detail, which is not apparent to the average traveller when they're looking at, for example, human trafficking and those kind of different visas and so on. That's the thing perhaps we're not seeing in the smooth running of the airports.
Absolutely. Look, John, thank you very much. John Strickland there, who is an aviation consultant, just filling you in on the strikes that are taking place at various different airports across the country at the moment. I know that I keep taking the mickey, but actually I do find it quite funny, to be fair, that there appears to be next to no impact, apart from the odd misstamped passport, that is, at our airports. Loads of you have been getting in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, on our main issue of the day, which is about this Prevent report allegedly not being published, allegedly for fears, I should say, of offending certain elements of that Muslim community, certain Islamic groups who may have been taking money, taxpayers' money, from the Prevent scheme designed to stop terrorism and actually still pumping out terrorist ideology. Lots of you very, very angry. Thomas says, for the final time, I will say this, I'm sure it won't be the final time, Thomas, actually, we are being put under threat in this country by the woke brigade, and I can't help but wonder, Thomas, if indeed we are. Some people, some civil servants in the Home Office there saying, oh, we couldn't possibly say that just in case it offends people. Well, I'll tell you what I find offensive. Massive, massive terror attacks. gbviews at gbnews.uk is our email. Get them coming in, people. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up, the government revealed that £1 billion devolution deal for the North East is underway. We'll have the latest on what it means for that region next. But before that, I think we've got a little look at your weather.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir, and here's your weather update. Your headlines: breezy, if not windy. We're seeing outbreaks of rain towards the north, showers to follow, and a little sunshine in the mix. Low pressure centred across Ireland. Strongest winds, Irish sea coast through the evening, as well as southern coast. This weather front clears eastern counties of England and it pivots across Scotland, so more wet weather to come here with some hill snow. So let's pick up on that rain. The rain stretches towards Shetland and Orkney. Strong winds here. Returns to western Scotland as another batch of rain moves from Wales, West Country, northern England towards more eastern areas. Further showers also likely across Northern Ireland, and they will be heavy. Cold in the north to start the day on Thursday, and with that, some showery bursts of rain. Sunshine and showers for England and Wales. So through the day, you can see some really quite wet weather across the central belt. That will clear. Still some showers filing in on a strong wind, and a cluster of showers keeps Northern Ireland rather wet as well. Further south, most of the showers will be further south and west across England and Wales. They could be heavy at times with some sunshine coming through further east, where you'll see the driest interludes, but even here, 1 or 2 showers just coming through. Temperatures then a notch down on today. Some clearer skies overnight on Thursday into Friday morning will allow for some ice towards the northeast as this batch of rain arrives across Northern Ireland, clips the Isle of Man, northwest England, and moves up across Scotland. Now, there's a rain warning in force from 3 a.m. on Friday across central and southern parts of Scotland as this rain pushes ever northwards. And again, the risk of some snow above around 300 metres. Elsewhere on Friday, you'll see more in the way of cloud as another batch of rain arrives from the southwest and brighter skies further east, where you'll see a cold start to the day on Friday. So that's the picture through the next few days. What's the outlook as we head into the weekend? Well, the rain will clear on Saturday. The winds then lose their sting. We'll see some dry skies, rain in the southeast on New Year's Day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online, this is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We've covered absolutely loads so far today, whether or not it's a counter-terror report essentially being covered up, why the police aren't investigating more than 1 billion burglaries, and why our conviction rate is down below 6%. Strikes, the worst strikes you've ever seen in your life. Border Force went on strike and absolutely nobody noticed, not just because of what's been going on in the channel, but because of airports as well. But this, dare I say, it might actually be some good news. A £1.4 billion devolution deal for the North East was announced by Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove today. The proposals outlined by the government could bring together 7 authorities and more than 2 million people in the North East under one elected mayor. The deal includes £48 million of new funding a year over a 30-year period, plus a £500,000 transport budget. There's also £17.4 million for new homes. With me to discuss this announcement is Chris Lloyd, Chief Feature Writer for the Northern Echo. Chris, good stuff. Great to have you back on the show. What does this really mean for the North East? Do people care?
People think their council should really just be concentrating on emptying bins. But I think this is a real seismic change here in the North East. We're very lucky to have seen this sort of system in operation in the Tees Valley, where we've got a Conservative mayor, Ben Houchin, who has, I think, really spurred the regeneration agenda in the area. And he's given the Tees Valley, an artificial region, he's given it a real cachet, and so it's able to punch above its weight. So I think people will see some difference, hopefully some improvement. It's always good for people to take local control of budgets and be able to respond more quickly than that distant place, London, which is a long, long way away from a lot of people's lives.
I must say, I just read something there that I thought was quite interesting. An odd number stood out to me. So there's £17.4 million for new homes. 17.4 million is the number of people who voted for Brexit, isn't it, in the EU referendum? The North East came through like a racehorse for the Brexit campaign, didn't it? Do you think there's a little bit of a nod and a wink there?
Well, I don't know about the specifics of the numbers, but the whole red wall issue is very interesting in the way that the people voted for Brexit and then crumbled from Labour into the Tories. And so the Tories have got to be seen to be doing something in the North East. The whole levelling up agenda is very, very difficult. It means so many different things to different people, from skills to transport, and so all of these things are now being brought together, and people will begin to see a bit of a difference. By 2024 there will be an elected mayor, perhaps, so there is definitely a playing to the red wall agenda, or people kind of taking back control, taking more control locally, but it's going to be fraught with real difficulties, because you will remember back in 2004, there was the regional devolution referendum we had in the North East, when a certain Dominic Cummings led the fight against an elected regional assembly, because we didn't want another, or he said we didn't want another layer of politicians imposed upon us. So it's very interesting now that it's the Conservative government by Michael Gove that's giving us this.
Yes, no, indeed, absolutely. And from what you can gather so far, conceivably, apart from a little bit more local self-determination, what could this actually bring to the area? Will this see any real tangible benefits? Will it now be a bustling hub?
Well, let's hope it will be a bustling hub. I think that it's certainly in the Tees Valley, it is dependent upon a personality, a real personality emerging in the form of Ben Houchin, who has a new agenda with new ideas, nationalising our local airport here, and really promoting regeneration of an old steelwork site into Europe's largest regional development commission. So that is a new big idea, and it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the region, the northeast, comes up with those big ideas. There's talk of a green superport that may be the big idea to kind of boost trade and boost industry, green power industry as well. So that could be the big idea. And that's really what these new ideas need to kind of get a real grassroots buy-in, is people being able to see that change is happening, change for the better, rather than the same old churn of grave faces on councils and such bodies.
Absolutely. Well, I think what a fitting and deserving area and part of the world to actually go and get this shot in the arm. Chris Lloyd, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Chief feature writer at the Northern Echo. There he is. Right, OK, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, after the news, over 1 million cases of theft and burglary went without anyone being charged by police last year. That's an absolute shocker. Conviction rates are dropping below 6% as well. A law and order nightmare, people. Why is this happening? Do we need more bobbies on the beat? Where do we put them up, actually? Because haven't we closed all the police stations? Yeah, it's almost like this is an absolute mess. But, of course, we keep hearing that our police force is institutionally misogynistic and racist anyway, don't we? So I suppose if fewer people are getting stopped and searched, that's what progress looked like. And MPs could be being left vulnerable to blackmail. I mean, this is hilarious, really, in a way. That's in line of a report that MPs on one foreign visit were met at their hotel by prostitutes. No insinuation whatsoever, of course, they did anything with those prostitutes, other than maybe just talk to them. But first, it's your latest headlines.
"5:32, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. West Midlands Police arrested a 22-year-old man in Birmingham city centre last night, whilst a 21-year-old man was arrested in London. Police are appealing for any information on the weapon used in a shooting which killed a 26-year-old on Christmas Eve in Wirral. Merseyside police say they're working to establish whether it could be connected to any other incidents in the area. Beautician Elle Edwards was fatally shot at the Lighthouse Inn. A man remains in critical condition. 2 people have been arrested in connection with that incident. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action. Members of the PCS union working at multiple UK airports are continuing their strike over pay, jobs and conditions. Meanwhile, driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres. On the rail network, TSSA union members are also on strike. That's causing disruption on Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but his condition is under control. The former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it's arrested 7 people due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. Number 10 has rejected claims that the UK is inciting riots within the country. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be right back.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back, everybody. Right now, UK police have been criticised for leaving over 1 million cases of theft and burglary in England and Wales last year unaccounted for, essentially. The proportion of crimes that concluded with a charge is also down to just 5.4%. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has branded the figures disgraceful. Lots to unpack here. Peter Bleckley is here to do it, former Scotland Yard detective and undercover cop. Peter, is this just a prime example of how we can't do law and order on the cheap?
The harsh reality is that in certain regards, the British police are no longer fit for purpose. We have half a dozen police services in special measures, so that would seem to back me up on that front. And quite frankly, millions of people who are victims of crime are not getting any service, let alone some sort of service, and consequently, we have created, or the police in England, Wales, and elsewhere in the UK have created a criminals charter, and crooks are simply getting away with it.
You mentioned the criminals charter there. I mean, I read with absolute disgust on the front of the Mail today, mother knifed to death by burglars, she protected her family. I can't help but feel as though those burglars know there's every chance that they won't get caught, and that's why they go and burgle.
Yes, and I'm going to make reference to my time in the police, which was between the 70s and the 90s. And let me make it perfectly clear, it was far from a crime-free nirvana that we lived in, and policing had some very serious issues, some of which have been tackled reasonably well in recent years. However, the difference then to now is that the streets were a hostile environment for crooks. And that was because the police patrolled. They went out at night and they walked the beat. That simply doesn't happen.
No.
So if you were out at night and you were a nighttime burglar, one of the things you had to consider and be fearful of was coming out of that shop or that home and bumping into a copper who might just walk round the corner. Now, it didn't happen all the time, of course it didn't, but it did happen some of the time, and that and very robust policing did make, by and large, the streets hostile.
Yeah, I find it remarkable that every single year we report on the percentage that Britain's population has risen by, and then our authorities, namely our police, they don't go up in the same percentage whatsoever. In fact, they go down, the number of officers that we've got. So we've now got more people than we've ever had in Britain and fewer police officers.
Yeah, well, the decade of austerity was catastrophic for policing. You know, and Boris Johnson's pledge to recruit 20,000 officers, that target should be hit by March of next year, probably will be met, but really just kind of glosses over the deep malaise, and that is that as many as they recruit through the front door, officers are leaving through the back door because they are disillusioned, they are overworked, undervalued, they've got dreadful leadership and supervision, and quite frankly, it's not a vocational job anymore.
You're being asked to do incredibly dangerous things, incredibly difficult things on a daily basis and run headfirst into situations that are very often life and death. And then afterwards, it would appear to me, from an outsider's perspective anyway, gone over with a forensic level microscope to see whether or not you might have accidentally misgendered someone at some point whilst you've done it. Seems like a bit of a shocker, really.
Yeah, the Police Federation does support its members.
Yeah.
But sometimes officers don't join the Federation now because they can't afford the subscriptions, which, of course, is a concern. And yes, policing is very much in the spotlight, but they've got themselves in a tangle over the years. And I need to say at this point that there are many heroic officers out there, as you've alluded to, doing brilliant stuff every day for the benefit of you, me, the viewers and listeners, and for that we are eternally grateful. But so often it's lions led by donkeys, and because it's really not a vocation now where you would join and your intention throughout would be to do your 30 years, cops do 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, get overworked, disillusioned, and of course they've gathered some skills during those times, which are very much welcomed by outside employers.
Absolutely, incredibly employable people with a perfect skill set for, frankly, most industries and most sectors. Serious question marks as to where on earth we would put the police officers, though, if Boris Johnson's plan to re-recruit, I'll say, 20,000 police officers because you closed a load of police stations.
Oh, absolutely catastrophic, selling off the family silver. And that, of course, has all been a part of the breakdown with local communities. Because if somebody now is a victim of crime or they see something in their high street, in all likelihood, the police station that used to thrive and flourish within that high street will now be flats or a pizza restaurant.
Or one of them was turned into a cannabis factory.
Yes,
as well,
indeed,
which actually, well, to be fair, was hilarious, but not in a wider point. Let's just move on now to the Prevent scheme, because this was a story that I'm keen to revert back to. We've been leading every single hour with it now. Now, Prevent, counter-terrorism, etc., we all know the drill there. Well, there's a report into it, and it's being muzzled at the minute as it currently stands, because supposedly there are groups who get Prevent money, so funding for the Prevent scheme, designed clearly to stop the spread of extremist behaviour, who apparently have actually been promoting extremist behaviour. Those groups, as we understand it, Islamist-related. Concerns amongst the Home Office that if they are named and shamed, they might take legal action, or actually it might whip up some kind of anti-Islamic sentiment, etc. What's your views on this? Shouldn't it be out there so the public can find out who these groups are?
Let me point out where cowardice on behalf of the establishment in terms of telling the truth and tackling the truth has led us, and this is very much connected to policing. What about child exploitation stories?
Exactly.
In so many communities that were predominantly crimes committed by men from a particular ethnic background, and the police ran shy of it.
In fact, they said they did as well. They didn't want to stoke up racial tensions, men of predominantly Pakistani heritage.
Indeed, and dozens upon dozens of children were repeatedly raped, abused, fed drugs, alcohol, and horrendous, abominable, unforgivable things were committed to those young people who were invariably vulnerable, and families were destroyed. There has been some clawing back of that situation, and we have seen some groups of men convicted for these crimes. But let's all remember, this became the problem that it was because people were afraid to tell the truth. And the truth is not something to be afraid of.
Yeah, indeed. But they are afraid of it. They're afraid of potential legal action. My counter to that will be, well, if you can prove it, then they shouldn't have anything to be afraid of. I suspect they're afraid, really, of potentially painting quite a devastating, although unfortunately true picture to the British population, which is that there are groups out there, quite large-scale groups, and potentially large-scale groups predominantly of the Islamist persuasion, who really do not wish as well, because it would go against the narrative, Peter, that far-right terror is the one that we really have to watch. And, of course, we do have to watch it, and it is on the rise, and we cannot get around that. But the Islamist terror threat surely is the most pressing one still.
And it remains, and it is still a sizable threat. And we need to be very grateful to our security services and our counter-terrorism police for thwarting so many plots. But, of course, you can't always be successful. And look at the dreadfully high prices that have been paid with so many people losing their lives because people get brainwashed with this terrorism, radical Islamism ideology, and they go out onto the streets and commit horrific acts.
Are you concerned, just lastly, Peter, are you concerned that if this report is redacted, if names of groups aren't put in there, or it's watered down, or the language of it is toned down, that actually that is wokeism that could end up costing lives?
If any group is shown, and just gather the evidence, it's not that difficult, that, number one, they received money with which they should be promoting the Prevent programme, but if then, on the other hand, they are promoting radical Islam, then let's name and shame. Let's put it out there.
Peter, thank you very much, as ever, my good man. Cheers, and appreciate you coming in. Peter Bletchley there, who is a former Scotland Yard detective and undercover cop. Right, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the lack of burglary charges. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Pete says, is it possible that the CPS requires too high a level of proof before agreeing that the police can charge someone? Yeah, well, Peter's actually still here. Peter, is there any truth to that? I'm getting double bubble out of you today.
There is an evidence threshold that needs to be met. And so the CPS need to be confident that they will secure a conviction. And that, generally speaking, is where they set the bar.
OK, fantastic. Cheers, Peter. Hi, Patrick. In my city... I hadn't planned this, by the way. This is not a stitch-up, sorry. Hi, Patrick. In my city now, we have no police stations open to the public and only one actually still in use and for office work only. You need a car now to get to a police headquarters and still get nothing. Peter's already touched on that, to be fair, hasn't he? Which is that realistically it is a bit of a shocker now that the idea of community policing has gone out the window in many respects. Simon says, too many officers looking at online nonsense. I suspect, though, Simon, to be fair, it very much depends what that online nonsense is, because there's quite a lot of stuff online I would want police to look at. But anyway, zero leadership ability. Install an ex-head of the armed forces to straighten them out. Up the level of pay to keep the staff and stop an ethnic minority mandate. That's interesting stuff. There you go. All right, he's hit a few areas in one there, as old Simon, but thank you very much. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in. Right, we're moving on slightly anyway, because British politicians are leaving themselves vulnerable to blackmail, apparently, because of their behaviour abroad. So The Times has reported that MPs on one foreign visit were met at their hotel by sex workers, although, of course, there is absolutely no suggestion that the MPs knew in advance that the sex workers would be there or that they used their services. No suggestion whatsoever. It sparked fears that their behaviour could lead to incriminating evidence being used against politicians. Joining me now is ex-Met Police officer Steve Roberts. Steve, thank you very much. How easy is it to blackmail a boozed-up MP abroad?
There's really three distinct levels of risk here. I mean, the first one is these MPs are going as representatives of this country, not representatives of the government, but as representatives of this country. And if they're behaving like drunken philanderers, then they're damaging the reputation of this country. And, you know, it's unacceptable. The second level, of course, gets you into potentially blackmailable behaviour. They shouldn't be doing anything where they wouldn't be entirely happy for their partner to see it, for their neighbours to know what they've done, or indeed for it to appear in a report on a national newspaper. And the third level is rather more sinister, where they become the victims of honey traps by hostile governments that are actually actively looking for people in positions of power and influence who can be blackmailed into exerting their influence in the interests of that hostile country.
Do we just have to expect, if you are an MP on a foreign trip, that your room is probably bugged and at some point someone might try and stitch you up?
I don't think we have to expect that, but MPs and peers going abroad will, as a matter of routine, be warned that that's always the potential. And of course, if you're not doing or saying anything in your bedroom that you would worry about anybody else knowing about, then so what? The people who've bugged you, if they are indeed bugging you, will have a very boring evening.
It does make me laugh a bit. It reminds me of that, I think it was Little Britain, where there's the MP who's stood outside his house, he's got his wife and kids next to him, and he's gone, you know. It's a little bit like this, isn't it? I just walked into my hotel room and I found a North Korean prostitute there, and as I asked her to leave, all of my clothes fell off, and before I knew it, you know, it does seem a little bit like this. Do we have to accept that maybe some MPs are seriously, current MPs are in some way, one way or another, being blackmailed? Could they have been got at?
I think we have to accept that there is always that possibility, and there is always a possibility that it's actually happening now. That doesn't mean that we know. It just means that we have to accept and behave as though the potential risks are actually real risks and insure against them.
What would they do then if you're an MP who's found himself enjoying himself a bit too much abroad in a foreign nation with a lady who you shouldn't have done, and you realise that you're now probably the victim of blackmail? Can they go to someone like you when you were serving in the Met and say, look, bit sensitive this one, Steve, this has happened, can you do anything about it? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, they wouldn't be reporting to me, they'd be reporting to some of the people who worked for me. But what I would say to them would be, you need to report it to your Palace of Westminster security officer, through them to the police as an attempt at blackmail, and those authorities would liaise with the security services, the intelligence services, to try and neutralise that threat. But what you would have to accept is that the future of your political career probably would not include any access to sensitive information.
There you go. Well, Steve, thank you very, very much. It's much appreciated. You coming and giving your insight there. That is ex-Met Police officer Steve Roberts, who's just filling us in on a rather interesting story that emerged about allegations. It's just allegations, really. There's absolutely no naming and shaming of MPs, or indeed genuinely any insinuation that any of them have actually seriously done anything wrong, but just about MPs on foreign trips, supposedly putting themselves at a little bit of risk. One trip to another country involved, apparently anyway, MPs opening their door to find prostitutes in their rooms. No insinuation that they did anything with those prostitutes. Right, thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch throughout the course of this show and everyone who's been interacting with me over the course of this week as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Lots of you were getting in touch initially about what we were talking about when it came to the Prevent scheme and the Prevent programme. I'm going to be back at 8 p.m. tonight till 9. I'm going to go back in on this, people, because I think this is an absolute whopper and it's got a lot of you hot under the collar. If you are just joining us, supposedly there is a new report that's about to drop, an independent report into the Prevent programme. £40 million of taxpayers' money goes into that Prevent programme, and it is designed to stop radicalisation or cut back on radicalisation. The implication, anyway, is that it's currently being blocked from being published. Why, you may ask? Well, because some groups have been, reportedly, receiving money from the Prevent scheme and continuing to actually put out extremist views to people, indoctrinate people, etc. Serious concerns that some people in the Home Office think, well, we can't possibly publish that, it might offend elements of the Muslim community. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Up next, it is Jubes & Co. with Emily Carver, who's right here in the studio right now. Fabulous jacket, I must say. What have you got coming up on your show?
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm going to be following on from your fantastic show, actually, and asking why on earth these Home Office officials think it is their job to redact the names of individuals and organisations that have been accused of spreading extremist ideology. Is this political correctness gone mad? Are they genuinely worried about being sued? What on earth is going on there? I'm going to be asking my panel and you at home to let me know what you think. We're also going to be getting stuck into the police. Why on earth are they solving no thefts and burglaries? That's a difficult word to say. And we're also going to be asking, is it time to get on the diet now after feasting over the festive period?
Right. OK. All right. There we go. Well, it's a good show, apart from the diet bit. Emily Carver will join you very, very shortly for Jubes & Co. Thank you very much, everybody who's been watching and listening in. I've been Patrick Christys. I'll be back again at 8 p.m, but right now it's your weather.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir, and here's your weather update. Your headlines: breezy, if not windy. We're seeing outbreaks of rain towards the north, showers to follow, and a little sunshine in the mix. Low pressure centred across Ireland. Strongest winds, Irish sea coast through the evening, as well as southern coast. This weather front clears